Hey guys, welcome to the last family affair for the month of September. All the action we're talking about today is going to kick off October because, tomorrow is October 1st. It's an exciting Friday, guys, and it's a special Friday because $2 Tuesday is still going today over at Sports Memo, guys. We got three big plays, first of which goes tonight. So you can get any one of those three guys for $2. Obviously, best option, go out and snag all three of those guys before that first play goes today. Just $5, and you're getting three big 5% winners. We also got a big 3-day package over at Sports Memo, guys. You use promo code SMT39, and you're getting a 3-day all-access pass of your favorite capper or cappers over at the site for just $39, $13 a day. Deal you're not going to get anywhere else. You're not going to beat anywhere else, guys. Joe said it before. We've had plenty of firsts as Sports Memo, as Wager Talk, and on this show. Today, we got another one for you. I'm sure you probably weren't expecting to see me right off the rip. But unfortunately, the D'Amicos are out of the business again for a little while. They are sick. So it's another Michael's takeover for you this week. Dad, how you doing today?
Hey, son, how are you? Did you have to look to see what month it was that you didn't know it was September and October was starting tomorrow?
Maybe before the show, I had to double check to make sure that there were 30 and not 31 days. So I didn't say that college was still in September, but
yeah, I know, the disappointing thing about last show is you guys, I know from the responses and the comments, you guys love the money line underdog parlay. A field goal away last week. We had three winners, and Arkansas misses that field goal against Texas A&M, or we would have cashed at $3,300. Disappointing. We'll see what we can do this week.
Yeah, hey, 3 out of 4 and upset winners. And, I saw that last week, I believe Arkansas, most of the lines ended up being 2. Some of them were 2.5. That's a push against the spread on a small line, too. So that's definitely some progress to be made and a close one on that one. But, guys, I mentioned real quick at the top, we had one more surprise for you this week, one more first for this show. We are welcoming a guest into our home. Since the D'Amicos were sick, we thought who better than the family doctor to make a house call for the week. So unfortunately, nothing he or we can do for the D'Amicos since they are out suffering for a couple days, other than obviously think about them. And we're wishing Joe and Dion a speedy and smooth recovery. But one thing I know Dr. Chuck can do is pick you some winners. And I hope you brought your broom today, Dr. Chuck, because we had a good one over there on Full Count yesterday. We swept the board on those best bets, and something's telling me that we might need it again today. So pleasure to have you here. How you doing today?
Yeah, glad to be here. Yeah, I was messing with you that we need to mention some baseball. But yeah, I hope Joe and Dion feel better. I wish that this house call could help them feel better, but I'm glad to be here, make a guest appearance, and I think maybe the first non-family guest, right? So
yeah, absolutely. I'll actually be over back hosting Full Count later today, so I'll have some baseball to talk for you guys later. But today we got football action for you, and while the panel is obviously a little bit different, faces are a little bit different, the format and the winners aren't changing. And we kicked things off with that money maker we were talking about earlier. As we mentioned, a good week on that one last week, just short of what we're looking for. But we got 3 confidently barking dogs for you today. And I'm not talking about my 3 crazy ones upstairs. We're talking about underdogs. We're talking about winners. Dad, you want to kick things off and give everybody your opening leg of the parlay this week?
Thanks, Jeff. I just want to make one correction. For those that are interested in a 3-day all access at Sports Memo, the code is SMT3. So Sports Memo T and just the number 3 at checkout. That gets you any capper, any 3 days you want. You go in, you register the days, and you'll get 3 days, including any 5-unit plays, any 10-unit plays, all for just $39. Well, we had a winner last week on our upset special. We're not going out on the limb too much here. We're only taking a 3-point underdog, but we're going to back the North Texas Mean Green. It's just a situation for me. Yes, I have Florida Atlantic as the little better team, but you have to learn to win on the road before you can cover as a road favorite. They've gone to Ohio. They had a 2-yard edge, but they lose. They go to Purdue. They had a yardage edge, but they lost. Now they have to go to North Texas. So to me, with this Willie Taggart team, you need to prove you can go away from Boca Raton and win a game outright. On the North Texas side, disappointing back-to-back losses against UNLV and Memphis. Memphis, they played very well. They had a 473 to 334-yard edge. The reason they got blown out against UNLV and lost by 10 against Memphis, turnovers. They were a -2 turnovers in both games. Austin Une with a 12-6 ratio. I think he takes care of business back at home for North Texas, and I will call them for leg number 1 of our this week 3-team moneyline parlay.
Yeah, thanks for that correction, Dad, on that promo. I misread that, so I'm glad you caught it, and I didn't constantly say the wrong thing again. So yeah, you guys saw it for a second there. I'm going to take the blame when I start talking, but I messed up that graphic last night and just caught it. But even though we're going 3 teams today, guys, a 3-teamer with $100 bet, you're still looking at a $1,144 payout. So we still got some good odds for you. Dr. Chuck, you're sticking on Saturday, so we're going to let you go next. What do you got in your inaugural leg of this Barking Dog parlay?
Yeah, I'm so glad to be a part of this. I love putting these together. Just, it's not something you want to make your biggest play of the weekend, obviously, but they're big deals. Like you said, it's only 3 of us, but it's still going to net you 4 figures. I'm looking in the Big 12, Kansas, who I suppose is still underrated, undervalued. I think everybody still thinks of the Kansas from the years past, but this Lance Leopold team is different. They're undefeated for a reason. It's not smoke and mirrors. Jalen Daniels is fantastic, and I think people confuse him with maybe he's the quarterback that used to be at Arizona State and is with Brian Kelly. I don't know if people know who this guy is yet, and I think this line speaks to that. I lost a big play earlier this season because I didn't think Matt Campbell was going to beat Iowa, and I can't believe that they actually went to Iowa City and won that game. But I think it was the fact that Kirk Ferentz and his kid can't put any offense together and don't care to. And I don't think it had a whole lot to do with Iowa State, whose defense has been decent. But last week at home, Baylor comes in and kind of, put it on them. I mean, they did only win by 7, but they were dogs and they were a short favorite, and they just put it on them, won by 7. I think that is a little misleading as well. I think maybe what the books are hoping is they see Baylor as a ranked team come in and beat this team, and then this team goes on the road to face what people think is the Big 12 bottom barrel. They're not. This is a bowl team. I think they win this outright kind of easily. I can't believe that they're dogs. I made them to be home field advantage favorites. And further to my point of looking for the spots that you want to attack on this, who on earth would want anything to do if this was in Ames? They're telling us this is close to a double-digit spread on Iowa State. So I'll fade that all day. I think Jalen Daniels really makes the defense hurt, and they're at home, and I think they go to 5-0.
I like it. I've been keeping my eye on that Kansas team. I like that Kansas team. That offense was, through a couple games, was one of the most productive offenses in the league, and they had 2 wins last season, 3 wins overall in the last 2 years. So, hey, talk about a quick turnaround and an impressive turnaround. Yeah, last week we won 3 out of 4 of those dogs, like we said. 2 of those winners were both the NFL games that we had going. You guys saw that graphic that popped up there for a second. My picture was wrong, so I messed up my own play on it. But guys, layman's terms, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. For my last leg of this parlay, I'm going back to the Denver Broncos that won me that upset last week. I think that the market is just continuing to undervalue this Broncos team. I mean, they're taking on a Raiders team. Derek Carr may be 5-0 straight up at home against Denver in his career, but he's 0-3 already this season, and he hasn't faced a Russell Wilson-led Broncos team. You know, even I, before the season, was skeptical if this Wilson's and the Broncos tandem would click right away, or seemingly if it would click in general. He lost the opener. I was still skeptical after that first game against Seattle, but things are really starting to look a little more fluid. Over the last 5 years, a road team wiped Denver off of back-to-back straight-up wins at home in the first half of the season, is 19-4 straight up in that road game following those 2 wins. You know, I think that goes to show you that early in the year, both those things matter. Back-to-back wins, you ride that winning streak, and even the energy that was created with both of those games being at home for Denver, it carries over to the road in this game because it is so early. Plus, Josh McDaniels on the other side coaching the Raiders. There's 3 records, I have to say. 3-10 straight up on the road. 3-10 straight up after a road game, regardless of the results of that game, win or lose. He's 4-13 straight up after 1 or more consecutive straight up losses. And when you put those together, Josh McDaniels is 1-7 straight up after a road loss. I'm going back to what I think is an undervalued Broncos team at plus 120 on this parlay this week. And we're giving you those 3 teams at a $100 bet to win $1,144. So only 3 of them for you today. But hey, like we said, that's still a moneymaker for you when those 3 hit. So guys, over to the next section. You know, there's some big games on the card this weekend, and they may not all be, you know, underdog contenders, but they're definitely games to watch. They're definitely games that have opportunities to cash. And first 2, we're looking at college football. You know, it's a top 15 matchup. There's a couple of them. It's exciting. 7th-ranked Kentucky travels to Oxford as a 7-point underdog for their second conference game of the year, taking on a 14th-ranked Ole Miss team. Ole Miss is undefeated coming into this, but it's their first conference game of the season. And Kentucky opened their conference schedule with a statement win in week 2, beating a 12th-ranked Florida Gators team by double-digit points. You know, these are 2 of the 3 highest-ranked SEC teams that are not named Georgia and Alabama. And I look, this is just the 3rd time since November of 2019 that 2 SEC teams have faced off in a top 15 matchup, and neither one was named Alabama or Georgia. So, Dad, I'm gonna let you take the reins on these Saturday roundtable games. Why don't you get started on this one?
Well, I'm going to let you know that I'm double dipping in this game. I'm going to talk about the Kentucky Ole Miss game, and I'm also going to preface it by just saying this. Kentucky is my best bet at the end of the show, and it is an actual client all-access play. So if you buy my package for this weekend, you will be getting Kentucky as a play. Simply, I am a big fan of what Mark Stoops has done. This Kentucky team has learned how to win. Going on the road at Florida, yes, they did get outgained, but they were missing a couple key players. One of those key players that I'm talking about, part of the reason Kentucky's offense has only averaged 82 yards per game and 2.4 yards per carry. They're getting back Chris Rodriguez, who was a 1,400-yard rusher, 6.1 yards per carry. He was suspended the first 4 games. Now you have a healthy and fresh running back against an Ole Miss defense that allowed 262 yards and 6.1 yards per carry against Tulsa. Kentucky under Stoops doesn't make mistakes. They don't afford many penalties. And that's why they're 9-3, 75% as a dog in that role. You know, I look at Ole Miss as well. Have they been tested? No. The best defense they faced has been Tulsa. And, you know, yeah, they put up 462 yards against Tulsa, but this Kentucky team only allowing 272 yards per game, and they've held each of their last 3 opponents to a season low. I do like Stoops. I do like Kentucky. I like them to cover. And, hey, my friend VR says I'm going to sprinkle some on the money line as well.
I like it. You know, it's definitely, without question, an interesting matchup. You know, I'm gonna jump in here second on this one because I think two teams that are 4-0 straight up coming out of the same conference, and Kentucky's covered 3 out of 4. This is 500 against the spread in this one. Kentucky covered their first 3 games. It was a struggle last week. They did beat Northern Illinois. They only beat the MAC team by 8 points as a 26-point favorite, a big favorite. But, you know, as you mentioned, let's not forget, it wasn't exactly an easy one for the Rebels. I was looking at some similar things you were looking at, but over the first 3 games that you mentioned for Ole Miss, they allowed 13 combined points. Those 3 games were against Troy, Central Arkansas, and Georgia Tech. So they haven't faced the best of competition, but they gave up 27 points against Tulsa last week too. Ole Miss does hold that head-to-head edge between these two teams. They're 7-3 straight up in the last 10, and they're 6-4 against the spread. But I'm looking at the total in this one, I think, more. The Wildcats are 21-8 to the under as a road dog of 7 or less, and they're 18-3 to the under when that line's a little more specific, and it's 3.5 to 7. But they're 9-0 under Stoops in that situation. As for Ole Miss, their offense has strung together a couple good performances, like we mentioned, against some relatively bad teams. But even their own historical trends point to an under after those kind of situations. They're 14-3 to the under after putting up 31 or more points in 3 straight games. And just in the last 2 years, they're 9-1 to the under after 3 straight games with 1 or 0 turnovers lost. And they've gone under in all 6 instances when they put up 450 yards in 3 straight games. And I alluded to that earlier when the offense is stringing together those what look to be impressive outings. You know, regardless though, last 17 games, Ole Miss is 13-4 to the under. And with Kiffin at the helm, even the other side stayed to the under too. They're 10-1 against teams with a winning record, and they're 8-0 to the under versus teams that are averaging 31 more points per game. I think this is a relatively total high for trends that are running that strongly, and I'm looking under that 55. So, Dr. Chuck, you got a little bit of both sides here. You got, my dad looked at that side. I'm looking a little more at that total. But what view are you taking on this top 15 matchup?
When you said that this was one of the games that we were going to be prescribing winners for yesterday, I was like, well, that's exciting because I was on the football forecast show, and this was one of our roundtable games. And not to sound like any kind of broken record on this show or from yesterday's show, and not to stress anybody out with, everybody's on one side. Jesse and Dan Kaiser and I all kind of came to the agreement. This is too many points. And to Jeff's point quickly, I love this number because this is a lot of key numbers that you're getting to play under. 51 and 52 are big time numbers. 55 is as well. So 54 is interesting. If you get the 55, that's good. 54 is what we have here. Shop around. Obviously, always get your best value. If you want an over, you would take it at 54. If you want the under, shop for a 55 like Jeff was recommending. Maybe wait and see. Rarely do the totals. I mean, in a game that's pretty public like this, you'll get better value if you want the under, maybe closer to the game. But I guess this line reminds me I already picked Kansas, and in our money line underdog parlay, and now we're picking Kentucky. And I made a joke yesterday that this is not NCAA basketball season, even though it seems like it with what I'm playing. But I think it's interesting to remember that Vegas isn't predicting the score of the game. They're trying to get bets equal on both sides. And I think Kentucky's just kind of lost in the SEC. Just like what Ralph said, I really like what Mark Stoops has done. I think Rodriguez is a huge key here. I think they could control the ball, which, if you're looking at a team that could potentially come up with a 35-25 possession, you don't really want to be laying 7 points in that situation unless you're, really, really excellent on offense. And Jeff brought up, I don't think that's what we've seen from the Rebels so far. I mean, they've only played once, and it was in Atlanta, and that team has shown that they're terrible, even firing everybody, just last week. So I don't think we know a whole lot about what they can do. I thought this would be 3 or 4, which I know would be closer to what they call equal on a neutral field, but I think that's more correct because I said yesterday on the show that I think this is a money line sprinkle game. Ralph said this is a money line sprinkle game. I think 7 is far too many points. If you could even get a 7.5, if that were to go, I think it's a really, really solid bet. I think you're getting a lot more points than Ole Miss should be laying. And I just think that it's just a situation where they're just hoping this is a line that will get them 50-50, and they won't have a lot of liability because people don't trust Kentucky. And when Kentucky's good, they're boring. And like Ralph said, they run and play defense, and that's not what people like to see Lane Kiffin type offenses. And so I think tons of value on the touchdown here.
Yeah, I had narrowed my money line dog down to 3 teams, and this was number 3 on my list too. So I was even thinking about that underdog bet, but I like the value on the total even too.
Probably north of 2-1. I don't know what the number is, but yeah.
Yeah, but guys, without further ado, second college roundtable game on the list today. We know there is an exciting top 10 matchup on the card for Saturday. But since we spent some time last week breaking down Clemson's game on last week's edition of the show, this week, roundtable number 2, nearly another top 15 matchup. 9th-ranked Oklahoma State travels to Waco, Texas, as again, a 2.5-point underdog, taking on one of the highest-ranked one-loss teams in the country in the 16th-ranked Baylor Bears at 3:30 on Saturday. Baylor is undefeated in the conference. They beat Iowa State last week, 31-24. But this is Oklahoma State's first conference test, and they're taking on the only Big 12 team ranked higher than Oklahoma this season. I said it in the last game. It's a similar situation in this one. This is just the 4th time since December of 2018 that we see a top 20 Big 12 matchup that doesn't include Oklahoma. So it's fun to see some of these big teams coming up, stepping up, playing against each other and getting those marquee games. But back to you, college football. What are you looking at in this top 20 matchup in Waco?
Well, congratulations to Baylor, Jeff, like you said, undefeated in the Big 12. But I guess with one game under your belt, that really doesn't count as undefeated. I'm going to say this. There are times when my most hated word in betting is revenge. And people automatically assume that if a team loses one time, they have revenge at the next time. That is complete BS. If you're a 20-point underdog and you lose the game, you do not have revenge the next game. When you lose as a favorite, yes, that's revenge. When you lose in the Big 12 championship, yes, that's revenge. When you lose in the Big 12 championship, and if you won that game, you might have made the college football playoffs, yes, that is revenge, which is what Oklahoma State has. You add in that Gundy is 6-0-1 ATS as an away dog. You add in that Oklahoma State is rested off a bye, 17-2 in that role for Oklahoma State under Gundy. 13-3-1 ATS their last 17. So those are great situations and why I should be on Oklahoma State. But when I go to the other side, it's going to take me off the game. Yes, that's almost reasons to bet Oklahoma State, but don't get caught into saying, I like this, I like this, I like this, without looking at the negatives or the reason why you're not going to play a game, and that's where this game fits. When I look at Oklahoma State, Spencer Sanders has a 10-1 ratio this year. That's awesome. But who have they played? Home against Central Michigan, home against Arizona State, which we now know is a train wreck, and home against Arkansas Pine Bluff. They have played nobody. The sister of the poor schedule is over. You're now playing your first road game of the season. What did Sanders do last year? They played Baylor twice. They beat him in the regular season. They lost in the Big 12 championship. Sanders had a 1-7 ratio in the 2 games against Arnada and his defense. Do I think Baylor can slow him down? Yeah, I absolutely do. And when I look at Baylor, yeah, they weren't very impressive against Iowa State. They only had an 11-yard edge. They only rushed for 2.9 yards per carry. But going into Iowa State and winning in any situation is great. They went into BYU. They did get outgained. They lost that game by 6. That was fine. That was a non-conference game, first road game of the season for them. It's a game, to be honest with you guys, that I am going to pass on both sides. I see the reason to back Baylor. I see the reason in Oklahoma State. And yeah, I'd like to give you an opinion on this game, but there's times that you just throw a game out. There's times when even when you go through a game, you don't have a solid enough opinion to mention on the show. Those are my notes on the game. I'm going to wait to see what you two guys say and perhaps sway me one way or the other.
Yeah, I like it. If you guys are watching too, like, comment, subscribe, get going. That locks you in to see our shows later in the day. And we always like to know if you guys are on our side, against our side, or in this situation, if you have a side. So, Dr. Chuck, I'm going to let you follow that one up. These two teams aren't in-state rivals, but they're separated by just 5 hours and under 350 miles, and they square off in the biggest game of the Big 12 this week. What are you thinking?
So Ralph really had me going there at the beginning because I loved all the angles he was going at, and I was afraid that we were going to disagree, and it would have been a fun little banter back and forth. I totally agree that revenge is just a ridiculous thing, and he made a compelling case as to why. There's not a whole lot of guys, and Baylor's kind of shown it, but there's not a whole lot of guys that I trust more to shut someone down on defense than Dave Aranda. And I mean, he's kind of shown it. He was that Edo defensive coordinator, and before that he was at Wisconsin, and he deserved getting this job, and he's done great work with it. And when I look at this revenge factor, what I think is Spencer Sanders has put up these numbers against, like you said, I mean, the Central Michigan game was a mess. They put all those points up, and no matter what, I mean, there are a lot of teams that play a team like Central Michigan, like the Alabamas and the Georgias. I mean, Georgia even did this with Oregon. Oklahoma State should be able to put up 40-some points and not give up 40-some points. I mean, they won 58-44, but I was completely unimpressed with the second half of that game, no matter if it was week 1 or not. Arizona State is a nothing burger. And so, as you said, Arkansas Pine Bluff, I think the stats hurt the chances. I wonder if he didn't put those stats up, what this line might be. I fade completely that Baylor shouldn't be laying an entire home field advantage. Maybe the Cowboys travel well. Maybe Gundy is really good off of a bye week. I agree that those are factors. But what I think, as far as revenge goes, is Spencer Sanders will be pressing. And Aranda has figured this guy out. It's shown that he's figured this guy out, as Ralph said, with both games last year. And the worst situation for Oklahoma State backers that think that they could pull this off as an upset, if you call this an upset, is thinking Spencer Sanders is going to figure out Dave Aranda in what he's probably going to consider to be a desperate situation. And, I think the public, this is another fade the public Dr. Chuck type of play. You got a nice, beautiful looking 9 next to Oklahoma State. As Jeff was saying, this is a top 10 team with a bagel in the loss column, and they're on the road against a team that people probably think more of what went on with Art Briles and stuff like that. And they're getting points, and that is nothing I want anything to do with. Similar to Ralph with his Kentucky play, Baylor on the money line, I put out at $1.25 is a premium play. If you have my plays, the college football package this weekend, you will get that one. I think Baylor wins this game. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and maybe it wasn't as impressive last week against Iowa State. I think they're winning this game. I think Vegas is definitely afraid that they're winning this game, and I think the line speaks to that. And I think Spencer Sanders is going to have that negative ratio again.
Yeah, I find it hard to argue, but I'm going to say one thing. You said there's nobody you would rather have other than Aranda out there to stop the But the one name I'm going to throw out there
Yeah.
would be Mr. Jim Knowles. And I think that he's not, well, but he's not there anymore at Oklahoma State. And I think that the reason that I am staying away from, I'm going to give a small lean to Baylor, in my opinion. But that defense was the pride and joy of their recent years at Oklahoma State. But the Stevie Ray Vaughan to their pride and joy is taking his talents to the horseshoe and is trying to recreate that dominance at a different OSU. I mean, last year the Cowboys were third in the FBS. They were holding opponents 123 yards per game below their season average. This season, they rank 123rd. They're allowing teams to put up 96 more yards per game than their season average. They allowed 546 yards to that Central Michigan team that's averaging 410. And they allowed 390 yards to the Arizona State team that's putting up 334. So, you know, I have, like I said, I do have a preference towards that Baylor team. We said a lot of our talk my talk at least has been on that Oklahoma State team, but this Baylor team is a team that's one touchdown away from an undefeated season at this point. And it's not like that game was an upset that they lost by double-digit points. They lost a heartbreaker against a top 25 BYU team that is no schmuck. You know, it's the same Baylor team that hasn't lost against the spread at home in the first half of the season over the last 2 years. They're 6-0 in their last 6, and they're 8-1 in their last 9 against the spread at home overall in the last 2 years. So, you know, it's two quality teams that I know that there is potential, but I think that Oklahoma State defense is obviously going to improve with time. But I think that Knowles loss is something that they're feeling on that defensive end. I'm giving the lean to Baylor in a big conference win at McLean Stadium in front of their home fans. So, you know, that I'll throw it back to you. Does that change your opinion?
Good points, but no. And again, it's there's 60 some college football games, guys.
Yeah.
You don't need to bet them all. You don't need to have an opinion on them all. Just one quick handicapping advice. A team burns me once, I'm not afraid to go back to them. A team burns me twice, I really have to love them to go back to them. If you misread a team 3 times in a row in college football, in the NFL, in the NBA, it's okay to say, I'm just not going to handicap you for a while. There's obviously things that I misjudged about you, misread about you. It's okay to throw that away. There's plenty other games to find value. So, that's my number one rule is this. Make sure you really love a game and don't go in backwards to a game thinking that you have to fill a quota for a number of plays or you're trying to get revenge because a team's burned you multiple times.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. And I want to see what Oklahoma State does in their first big test of the season too. So,
and
guys,
I just have one.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Dr.
The only thing I would add exactly is, and Ralph kind of brought it up, this is what we're going to find out. I personally think going to Provo and putting up that effort was a plus. I think that, yes, they have a loss now, but it was, I think, an impressive effort. I think that was tough, way tougher than anything Oklahoma State has done. And I think, in addition, the public starts piling these things up in their head. Well, sure, Georgia's good, but 49-0, they beat Oregon by, and BYU beats Baylor and then goes and gets housed by Oregon. So Baylor has to be trash, right? And so, it's just one of those things. I think those things pile up in the bettors' minds, and those are things that you have to wade through. And so we'll find out. Maybe it wasn't a pro to go to Provo and lose. Maybe Oklahoma State is far better, and this is when we find out. It just doesn't seem that way to me on paper.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of questions will be answered about these teams and this conference for that to be said, at 3:30 Eastern on Saturday. But guys, jumping from 3:30 Eastern on Saturday all the way over to Sunday, got 2 more roundtable games. We're jumping over to the NFL, and I'm going to kill 2 with 1 stone here. I'm going to give you a little lead in, and I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm going to take the reins on this first NFL game because it's one that I'm excited to watch. You know, you have two of the most impressive quarterbacks under the age of 27 squaring off at 1 o'clock. You know, that doesn't narrow the list down as much as you think it might, but M&T Bank Stadium, Josh Allen travels to Baltimore to take on that 25-year-old Lamar Jackson-led Ravens. You know, in my opinion, you probably have two of the top three MVP candidates playing quarterback in this game. I may throw Jalen Hurts into a consideration with what he's done so far, but in the last 2 years, you probably have the best quarterback in the league, debatably Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, not counting Brady, Rodgers legacy aspects. And then on the other side, you probably have what the current front runner in Lamar Jackson, who's the most exciting and the most versatile, multi-dimensional quarterback, maybe since Michael Vick, if not obviously in the league right now. But even though Harbaugh is 20-9 against the spread after putting up 35 plus points and 14-4 against the spread after back-to-back games with 50 combined points, I'm taking a look at the total in this one. You know, sure, Buffalo played the Rams, but the most impressive thing that we've seen in as far as like a top-tier offense taking on actually both of these teams is the Miami team that we lost. Everybody's thinking about Tua after that one, but extremities are good. Not this game, but had to mention it. You know, that's the only true test that these defenses have faced. Buffalo, almost across the list again, is leading the league in points per game allowed, or they're in the top two in yards per game allowed, yards per play, rushing yards per game, passing yards per game, and yards per carry allowed on defense. They're either one or two. But I anticipate this defense giving up more than that 12.7 points per game and 214 yards per game that they're averaging, because I mentioned that Rams, we know the potential. There is absolutely no question that Rams offense has a sky-high ceiling in terms of potential. But we haven't seen that this year. And Buffalo, no question, has not seen a team as versatile as Boston, seeing as their three opponents, the Rams, rank 30th in rushing yards per game and 28th in yards per carry. Tennessee, even with Derrick Henry, 21st in rushing yards per game and 27th in yards per carry. And Miami, even 31st in rushing yards per game and 31st in rushing yards per carry. I will say I got that one before the end of the game last night. So if you quote me on those two may have changed. But you got two offenses that are putting up, they're 1-3 in points per game scored. The Ravens are the third best team in the league in red zone percentage. And that is Buffalo's only weakness. Well, I guess I should say their biggest weakness on defense. They're 31st in the league in red zone percentage allowed, whereas Buffalo's offense does it a little bit of a different way. They're first in the league in third down percentage picked up on offense, and they're fourth in the league in fourth down percentage successfully converted, resulting in the fourth highest average time of possession, giving them time. They drive the field. They do it smart. They do it on the ground. They do it through the air. They get Dobbins back. And I think Buffalo's, what is an impressive defense, is gonna see something that they haven't seen this season so far. They're just as good as last year. If they play like they did last year, there's obviously still the potential. But I like the over on this one because Baltimore's secondary, I could take a whole show talking about, Baltimore's secondary, I could take a whole show talking about that. I think Josh Allen will tear that apart. He'll get his points. I think Baltimore puts up some points too, and I'm looking at the over in a shootout in this one. Dad, NFL Game 1, AFC North, what's your take on Buffalo-Baltimore?
Well, Jeff, you talked about these two quarterbacks and where they are as far as in position for the MVP. I pulled this stat out of my reading this week, and I apologize. I can't quote what publication it's from, but since 1950, so we have 70 years, there's only been two quarterbacks that have 10 TDs in their first 3 games of the season, guess what? It's Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. So those are the only 2 guys in the last 70 years to do that, and they're matching up in this game. Let's talk about the big number on the table. Baltimore is a home dog. Well, in the last 4 years, they've been a home dog 4 times. They've covered all of those. So when you have Lamar Jackson at home and you're getting points, it seems like Baltimore is a go-to play. On the flip side, a negative for Buffalo. Buffalo has now lost 7 straight 1-score games. So if they're in a close game, they do not win it. Josh Allen has not had to play a 4th quarter where he's in his life or death battle. They either win by double digits or they lose a close game. So that is a concern to me at all. But Jeff, you broke down some stats, and there's only one way I can go because of these stats. You talked about offensive numbers. You talked about defensive numbers. My number one go-to number in the NFL is yards per game diff. So you take your offensive average, you subtract your defensive average, and you figure out what you're averaging per game. Well, Buffalo is not only number 1 in the league, they are plus 227 yards per game. They're averaging 441 on defense. They're allowing 441 on offense, 2-something on defense. So that means they're plus 227. How big of an edge is that? Well, Philadelphia is number 2 at plus 150 yards per game. And Jeff, your underdog moneyline parlay, many people probably don't realize Denver is actually number 3 in the league at plus 96 yards per game. I just wanted to mention that because you talked about the Broncos earlier. So when I look at Buffalo and their impressive performances, yeah, they held a Miami team that doesn't rush well and a Tennessee team that doesn't rush well and a Rams team that doesn't rush well. Well, guess what? I'll bet you Tennessee is going to be a better rush team by the end of the year. You know, I'm sure Miami is going to average more than 2.4 yards per carry. But the thing that stands out to me besides Buffalo's impressiveness at the plus 200 yards per game, Baltimore's defense. Number 32 in yards per game allowed. Okay, let's see. How many teams are there in the NFL? Oh, yeah, that'd be 32 teams. Dead last in defense. Yards per play allowed on defense. Number 31. I put those together, and I just have too much faith in Buffalo. Buffalo, by the way, 5-1-1 ATS off a straight-up loss. They're coming off that Miami defeat. I'm going to lean Buffalo. It's not going to make my card. I also do lean with the over. 51 seems a lot to me, but with Baltimore's defense and with Lamar Jackson, I think the Ravens are clearly an over team for at least the next short period of time. Ravens allowing 67.4% and 353 yards passing on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I like it. You know, I will say one thing I'll add too. Buffalo is also number 1 in the league in points per game differential too, outscoring opponents by 17.7 points per game. And Baltimore's rush offense that has been more based around Lamar Jackson gets J.K. Dobbins back this week, an Ohio State guy that we followed for a while. So he'll be back after a little bit of injury. And Jesse, just so you're aware, the doctor's making a house call because the D'Amigos are ill. So, but Dr. Chuck, what's your take on this one? We got some sides, we got some totals. It sounds like we're going to get some points. Do you agree? What are you thinking?
Never go against the family, Jesse. You guys got me licking my chops here because I don't know if this is something that is worth mentioning and not dwelling on a lot of time on, but you don't have to Google a whole lot further with the number one thing in the news right now than when Ian is hitting Baltimore. It's Sunday at 10 a.m. And maybe that's not going to matter, but it looks like 100% precipitation, 70-degree temperature, 15 to 20 mile per hour winds is how the whole game will be played. And so maybe that is something that isn't going to matter because both these quarterbacks can run on their own, and they probably, who are we going to trust more than some of the best quarterbacks in the league in nasty weather? But I don't think with Ian hitting there at this time, I don't think that is an over I'd want to be on. But it would really be hard to hold an under ticket with these two teams facing off, especially when Ralph said that the Ravens are so bad. I'm totally interested in backing Buffalo here because of the line. Everybody got to see that crazy fit Ken Dorsey threw when they couldn't get lined up for the field goal without any timeouts left in that game. Looked dead in the water. Then they get a safety and a kickoff and they get in field goal range. Can't get the snap off. I love the Bills coming off of that game. I thought Ralph was maybe going to get into this with some of the stats. Jeff was, because of what he mentioned in the yards per game diff. I love that. And post-game box score stuff. I mean, that loss might be one of the most anomalous box score losses of the season, of previous seasons. I don't have it right in front of me, but it was absurd. I mean, Josh Allen was like 42 of 60 for throwing. He threw 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think they had 500 yards to the Dolphins, maybe 200 yards. The first downs were like 20 to it was in the 20s to the teens. I mean, it was just an absurd box score differential, anomalous stuff. I think the books are hoping that we don't know that we don't study the fact that the Bills are better, but are off of a loss. I think it helps us even more now, and we might get an even better line now that the Dolphins lost. And whether or not the Dolphins lost to a team that was better than them, or whether they lost because they lost their quarterback, or all the different situations, that only improves now, because who's not going to want to fade the Bills off of a pretty ugly loss, even though it wasn't a loss in the box score, when they're facing Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, and that just doesn't add up to me. I can't imagine not being on the Bills, and I don't even like to back road favorites, but I think that's the exact spot that it's on, and the line speaks for itself. I thought it was going to be a little closer to pick 'em, and I know that sounds weird to say. I say that a lot. It sounds weird to say that you thought it would be better and it's worse, and that makes you more convicted on it, but it does. And I think the Bills probably take care of business and turn it around, especially off of a loss. Sean McDermott has made this a different situation. I mean, who would have thought before he got to town the Bills were just so beleaguered, and those fans, and now they have something to look forward to every year, and they're road favorites.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff,
Jeff,
real quick.
Yeah.
Dr. Chuck, I want to reach out and say thank you. And, there's times we're on these panels and you think we study everything, and I just want to completely admit that I made a mistake in this game. Not with my analysis, but in my mind, when I was looking at the hurricane track, originally it was supposed to go over Tennessee, and I didn't think it was going to affect the East Coast. So my bad for not looking at the weather. I absolutely should have. And I went to the database. In the NFL, when winds are 15 miles or higher, that's it. You don't have to look what teams are playing. You don't have to look what the totals are. When winds are 15% or higher, going back the last 20 years, it's only been 40.4% to the over. So that means almost 60% of the games go under with winds over 15 miles an hour. Dr. Chuck, thank you very much for bringing that up.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say, too, to a little bit of a different point. I saw the comments when you said that. I like that Raven Brown Lamar rushing TD prop with that total, keeping that ball out of the air, and even a J.K. Dobbins. You may get a good run on Dobbins being out for a couple games, coming back there and potentially having a rushing game. So yeah, absolutely. Hey, one thing that changes a lot. Absolutely. And that thing was named Ian this time. So got one more roundtable game, guys. Sticking on Sunday, headed to the nightcap, 8:20. Talked about those quote unquote youngins under center in this game. I think the more appreciated term is seasoned veterans for this one. Tom Brady taking on Patrick Mahomes, who may not be seasoned, but is getting a little closer to veteran than rookie at this point. As these two teams I saw yesterday, this will be the 6th matchup between Brady and Mahomes in their career. Brady holds the edge. He's won 3 out of the 5 so far. That includes regular season and postseason. And you got a Tampa Bay team now that very easily could open the season 0-2 at home. They could have an effect from Ian, not in the terms of weather, but they are playing in their home stadium, which was in question, I believe, but prior to the hit, but it seems everything's fine with the stadium structurally. They will make their way back there to play this game, but there could be, just an effect of what happened this past weekend on these people's homes playing at home. But, it's crazy to me. Again, I gave those stats earlier about the college football teams the first time that no Alabama. I found one more on this one. This Tampa Bay, Kansas City game is just one of 4 games on the slate for Sunday that features 2 teams with a winning record. The second one was our first game, Buffalo, Baltimore. Third one, the only undefeated team left, Philadelphia, taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars and the New York Giants against the Chicago Bears. This one's much more exciting than that one, but I thought that was crazy that those 2 were on the list with these ones. Dr. Chuck, it's been great having you here. I'm going to throw you the lead on this one. Why don't you get us started on that last hurrah of our show, the last hurrah of the Sunday card in the NFL? Floor is yours.
Yeah, it's funny, the first matchup with the quarterbacks and all the young quarterbacks, and you mentioned that it's not that uncommon now to say, hey, we have, you just brought it up, Jalen Hurts versus Trevor Lawrence. That's 2 more quarterbacks that fall into that under 27. I think, as Beck channeling Neil Young has been telling us all week, although Mahomes seems like a seasoned vet, and I think he was drafted pretty young, but I think he's still in that under 27 crowd. So
he is 27. Sorry,
okay.
Don't mean to cut you off. Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
Good. Okay, so almost. So I guess he fell out of that under 27 crowd, but really damn close. And this is the first time they've actually faced off. So they 6 times, but this is the first time they faced off since that kind of Super Bowl mess for the Chiefs in what was probably, I don't want to speak for either of you guys, probably one of the easier take the Bucs as a dog in the Super Bowl bets that I can remember in recent history, and it kind of went exactly like most people thought. Bucs defense isn't worse from then, and the stats this season show that they've actually improved. And I don't know. By the time we get to do this show, obviously, things have changed and things change further as they go on. I mean, this opened at 48 at shops, maybe even a 48 and a hook, and it's just been hammered down. Still haven't hammered through most of my key numbers, and I'd be all over this under. The Bucs have a real big problem on offense right now, and you wouldn't think so, but I think it's partly the fact that Arians is gone, maybe is a little bit. They're incredibly injured. He was basically facing Aaron Rodgers with Russell Gage as his number 1, and he's forcing it to Fournette, forcing it to Cameron Brate. I mean, they couldn't do anything until that last drive. And I don't think the Packers defense is all that fantastic, but Bowles sure showed that he can adjust. Packers went right down the field the first 2 times, and then they did a third, but they got the ball, and Rodgers could do nothing for the final 2.5 quarters of that game. I think he can do that same thing to Patrick Mahomes. Tyreek Hill's not there to take the top off. All the hyphenated offensive weapons for the Chiefs just aren't quite the same. I think at 45, I know this is hyperbolic, and they're just off of a 14-12 loss, and both teams just took their first loss pretty ugly ways. Chiefs did it on the road at least. Bucs lost at home, like you said. Not a good look. They can't lose, and they know that it's on the defensive side of the ball that they have to win this game. They have to control the ball as well, and as hyperbolic as this sounds, I think this is a touchdown and a field goal high, especially at the open. And I trust these defenses. Bucs are averaging 9 points allowed per game. Of course, the Chiefs have that offense that everybody thinks is just an over. But I think the money speaks for itself. A field goal lopped off of this. I'd play it under all the way down to 43 personally. Get the best number. I mean, you could buy that hook and get 46 right now, and you have all the key numbers covered. But I don't really have a choice on the side because I don't care, because I think this flies under, and I think this is overtime proof.
Yeah, I like it. Dad, your thoughts?
I'm going to make it short and sweet. Yeah. I can play with Dr. Chuck. You look at this Tampa Bay offense, it is nowhere near the offense it used to be. They have not scored a first half touchdown this entire season. Remember, they had O-line issues. Remember, they didn't have the time to work with Brady in the preseason. Evans, Gage, and Perriman as your wide receivers don't really impress me. Fournette, 4.0 yards per carry, hasn't gotten things going. You look at the KC side, 374 yards per game, but 317 yards per game the last 2 games. I think the issue is Bieniemy as the OC. We saw Mahomes have some issues going into the first half. He wanted to speed it up. Bieniemy, a running back, wants to run that ball and take some of that play away. I'm going to play under first half. The number is 22.5. I think you're getting value in that game. You look at what KC's done in the first half the last 2 weeks. 119 yards against the Chargers, 102 yards against Indy. If you're going to make adjustments, it's likely going to be at halftime, under 22.5, Tampa Bay KC.
I like it. No worries. I will fill them in. And if you need to run, guys, we've had some fun today. Went a little longer than normal. I believe, Ralph, my dad over there, has to run over to Wager Talk today. He did give you his best bet already, though, so don't worry. Came in that Kentucky game. I'll touch base on that again anyway. But if you need to head out, Dad, feel free. I'll give you guys my take real quick, again, to cut it out. But I like that under 2. My dad quickly alluded to it before he ran out of, before he had to get out of here. The injury report on both sidelines of these two teams are just full of skill position players. Kansas City has running back Ronald Jones, wide receiver Markevius Vandals-Scantling, and McCole Hardman. Tampa Bay still has Russell Gage, Rashad Perriman, Julio Jones, Chris Godwin, and Giovanni Bernard on the injury report. Does not mean all of those guys are going to be out, obviously, but does not mean that all of those guys are at 100%. And those are the guys that are putting up the points from Brady and Mahomes. Doesn't matter who's throwing the ball if you don't have anybody to throw it to. You got Mike Evans, but you got single coverage basically, or you got double coverage on Mike Evans all night because he's the only one you're worried about. I do think that both of these teams have some of the highest potential as offenses. I talked about LA earlier, the Rams. God, we know what their offense can do. We know what Cooper Kupp can do, obviously. And we know what Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes can do. I think Mahomes is adjusting without Hill a little bit. He's focused on Kelsey, which is obviously a good backup. Well, actually, he's not a backup, but a secondary receiver, I guess, behind Tyreek Hill. But Mahomes has a lot to prove until we ever call him the GOAT. But once Brady retires, there's an argument to be made that Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are the 2 best quarterbacks in this league. There's a lot of potential in this game, but I like that under 2 with all these injuries into play. When these injuries are off the board, we'll go back to talking about these 2 teams going into the shootout like the last game we think would have if Ian was not a factor. But guys, I know, like I said, I hope all of this has been informative. I hope it's been entertaining because we've been so entertained that there's no question this has been our longest show and we keep talking. But guys, I was going to start off the best bets with my dad and Dr. Chuck because, oh no, Dr. Chuck, I apologize. I was thinking yours was Baylor for a second. My dad was going to kick things off. He gave you Kentucky. He gave you his sides breakdown, and good thing he did because apparently Dr. Chuck makes me like to talk too because, like I said, 3 people and we've gone longer than ever. But Dr. Chuck, your best bet. What do you got going for us today on your choice of games outside of this slate?
It's got to be my fault. I just won't stop talking, so I apologize. I can go quickly as well. My best bet. So I did give you Baylor. My best bet is a different conference. I always dig deep for these things and get mocked, but there's value in the Conference USA. The Charlotte 49ers are at home. They're a terrible defense. UTEP is coming to visit, and I guess another word that I guess we're supposed to always love and follow is the word letdown. And I guess that's what we're supposed to think that the UTEP Miners are going to do. Dana Dimble just basically ended the Boise State coaching staff's career and walloped them, especially on defense. They allowed like 170 total yards to the Broncos, just crushed them on the blue turf. And I just think that this should have been bigger, and or Vegas should have been backing the home team that did slaughter UTEP the last time they faced off. And this shouldn't have been what it is. Charlotte getting points at home reeks. they are coming off of a terrible game against South Carolina, and I think UTEP wins this going away, and probably either should have been a dog or a touchdown favorite, and you're getting it at this line, and I think it's a non-game most of the game.
I like it. Hey, one of my favorite conferences to bet is the MAC. We are a little more local, but those small conference teams are some of the best. Guys, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone here. I'm going to explain my mistake from the beginning when I said about that money line parlay. If Chris will throw up that graphic on the back end for me that I messed up earlier that we put up. So our official money line parlay for today is not the Arizona Cardinals. It is the Denver Broncos. But that payout is correct at $1,114.40 for a $100 bet. So making it set in stone that Denver is our locked in money line parlay. But the reason I messed up was because when I told you guys that Kentucky was my third game on the list, the reason was because my top two games that were going to be on this list and my best bet, both could qualify for both. That's why I verify Denver, not Arizona. But hey, if you like one more than the other and you want to do with this pick as you please, so be it. They're a dog too. Put them on the money line because it's a 1.5. But I like Arizona plus 1.5 against Carolina. That's why I thought it could be a dog parlay too. But I'm going to take that 1.5 because being a Cleveland fan, I've seen some crazy 1-point wins just this season. So, hey, for a best bet, give me that point and that hook. Talk about replacing a head coach. I mentioned Knowles for Oklahoma State, replacing an OC at DC. I think the third most important position in your team is going to be your quarterback, and that's what Carolina did. The reason I put Arizona as my best bet and not Denver and put Denver on that is because of the opposition. I think Carolina is a much more vulnerable opponent than Vegas is, while Vegas is still vulnerable in my opinion, or I would not have used Denver. But Baker has played 12 games in his career against teams that allow 26 to 32 points per game. Those 12 games, he's 3-9 against the spread, and he's putting up 26.8 points. The very bottom end of that range there. He's just 12-22 against the spread as a favorite, 8-14 against the spread as a home favorite. And Kyler Murray's on the other side. That gives check to Arizona at quarterback. Coaches, Cliff Kingsbury's 11-3 against the spread in October since taking over Arizona. Matt Rule, in a situation that you should be the most comfortable, he is 5-13 against the spread at home. Check 2, coach, Arizona. Final thing comes down to the team. I mean, Arizona's just 9-2 against the spread in their last 11 on the road. And the Panthers are 0-7 against the spread against teams with a losing record since the start of 2021. And they're also 0-6 against the spread as a home favorite of 3 points or less. Can't win the close games. Can't win the home games. New quarterback that, hey, has a history of can't winning. Take it from me. My best bet this week, no question. Kyler Murray plus 1.5 with the Cardinals taking down the Panthers. But guys, real quick, last thing I'll run you through. Barking Dog Parlay, North Texas, Kansas, and the Denver Broncos pays you $1,114.40. Don't forget to check out Sports Memo before that first 5% plays. It's still $2 Tuesday, even though it's Friday. You got 3 5% plays you can get for just $5 before the first one goes today, or you get any or all of those guys for $2 each. Sports Memo deal for a 3-day pass. Any guy, $39. SMT3 upon checkout. And guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, come back and see this channel. And Dr. Chuck, thanks for joining us. It was definitely fun.
Great to be here.
Guys, good luck this weekend. Obviously, we had a blast. We'll talk next week.